Okay, good news. It's been a week. It's probably been one of the harder weeks that I've had. Um, I think that the shift to use the incubator is one of the coolest things I've come up with, and it's powerful because I don't trust, even though I read there was a paper that came out that showed how reinforcement learning is making the coders really good. And I'm nowhere near as good as their stuff. So I feel a little sheepish that okay, it's taking me a long time, but they're getting good. But I still don't trust them completely, and partly because um, there are decisions that need to stay in context that do change the outcome or the reliability or the understandability or something. And those tend to be, architectural style, documentation, completeness, consistency, getting a right answer versus having, a larger scope, a larger through line where that works is useful. So the best coders with tied to the best kind of structure that holds it together might be an incubator with, I think it's the MO3 is the world leader right now. It came out last year. And they're pushing it now on OpenAI, and it's good. No, it's good. So, but yeah, so an incubator, the idea of an incubator is just write um, mock code that doesn't have all of the production tools, tricks, tests, completeness, but figure out how should it look. And then those things I just talked about, those values that give us confidence that the system is correct, that becomes something we do, in flows and in services and operations protocols that go on beyond this. So that's probably good. So yeah, so the incubator is going, well, I'm starting to build these services and I'm seeing, oh, and these fit together a little differently. I've come to value, yes, running code above all else, but also I think they're what I'm calling mid-level commands, and I think that's maybe kind of a good name for them. But what they basically are is something that makes intuitive sense to the user when they're asking for work to be done. So a lot of people say, wait, why aren't you just using, like a chat interface for this? Like, well, it's because precision, accountability, the inner structure of this is still it's still got to exist in a world that stacks well. And so turtles all the way down means that we don't have an elevator shaft at the basement level, right? Where it would just keep going, like, oh, wait, what happened here? No, no, help me see, with plain logic, plain tools, and then replace huge swaths and chunks and then compare, side by side. Okay, this thing using LLMs, this thing that's only LLMs, you know, when do we use one or the other? And then if there ever is a problem when the straight LLMs are technically typically better most of the time, but if there ever is a problem with it, we can just go backwards and say, well, wait, this is what it should have been. What are we getting wrong? How do we fix the LLM? So I'm not agnostic to progress, and I'm not agnostic to the things that, let's be honest, some things are harder to grasp and harder to do with the budget and time and resource and history that I have. That's just true, unfortunately. Um, so, okay. So that's the philosophy is getting these mid-level commands. I think that's probably good. Another win this week has been, I keep thinking I've turned that off, apparently not. But another win this week is if I can, well, when I was building, let's just put it this way, it's a process manager was the win, but there's like, it's a win for reasons that maybe I'm not explaining very well. So process manager just says, look, ask for something to get done. If it has multi-state, handle this, state, get it done in multiple steps, and then, turn it in if everything worked out. If it didn't, we've got the ability to see what went wrong. Great. And then, so we wrote that, and then in the process of writing that, I really started to think about, but, I got it running, and then didn't wasn't the thing I can really think about, right? Like, what are the conditions, the steps, the commands? Like, that's like meticulous paperwork. So instead of building it step by step by step with conditions and commands, what I did is I took, it's the same play in the same playbook, it's just a little bit bigger chunk, and I created a stage. And so a stage can say, well, here's kind of your state, and here's what happens if it succeeds or fails. And then here are some predicates that describe the conditions we're looking at in state to, trigger this activity. So it becomes a little bit more of a conversation around, I understand what the state is, and this is what I do. Sure, that's a step, but the stage really says, and this is where we go from here. And so now we start to have these overlapping links, which are easier to think about, and graphs. So we can show, instead of like, well, I ran an operation dead end. Like, no, I ran an operation, and then here are, if it's just success or failure, but easy to add other types of outcomes. And then I can look, oh, those aren't defined yet. They're missing. Or this is creating a weird loop, or this is creating a confusing, intervention. I think we mix something in this process manager. So to be able to see what it is just means these mid-level chunks are important. But then taking that idea, and I took the binomial, they had a Bayesian question, and so the idea was, well, what is the equivalent in assembling a large Bayesian network? Because that's been the same problem with Bayesian networks. Like, if process managers and task engines or rule engines really are better done with these overlapping specifications, what's going on with these Bayesian tools? It's like, oh, wait, if we start, it reverses it, because a Bayesian node or cell would want to be interested in its parents, plural, instead of its children. So we're just going the other direction up the tree, because it's, the inference model. But what we're saying is, oh, here's just two or three things we can overlap. So I think I have a design for that. It's like, well, that's kind of cool, because I thought that would come much later. So I'm like, oh, great. So to be able to use that tool in the risk service would be interesting, because this whole thing is gathering operational data. But to be able to assemble things, look at how the assembly is working. We have, this week we built a value object, which is just a value, but it has an optional unit. It's easier to track. We're in metric, or we're in percentages, or we're dealing with whatever we're looking at. It has a unit, so now we know like for like, and we can do any typecasting if we need to. Like, that's easy. By the way, that's a protocol. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, like, given a value, a range is just an extension on that. So we've got that. We pulled that out of the Rabbit, out of the production stuff. Okay, good. I've got that in my incubator. So it's between 9 and 10. It's between 4 and 5. That kind of thing of these units. Like, great, useful, because that's usually back of the envelope when we want to say something. And then also it could have a distribution, and with its parameters in there. And so, what's the shape of the distribution? What are its parameters? And then we pulled in a couple tools, so we know if it's overlapping, or what's the likelihood of a value in this distribution. So now we're saying, okay, good. Because what I'm pushing towards is getting service levels and outcomes to use these values, right? And so to be able to pull that together, and then when we say, wait, I need to know, for example, I want to make an offer say, or I'm putting together a process manager, say, or I am making a choice, say, and I want to know, well, if it's one thing, what's its value, right? It's a service level. What's its value? What's our operational comparisons? Like, okay, I want to do this thing. I want it done for $10 or less. And I look at the like for like, and I say, yeah, that's what's the distribution of that? Like, okay, that's maybe a 98% chance of failure. Okay, that's fine. But then if we do stages on a Bayesian inference, we start looking at probabilities and validation accuracy, and we starting to look at specificity and sensitivity of our validations. And now we're able to use those with the value structures, with range and distributions, and we're able to compose these, as a tree. That's all useful stuff and should follow the same process. So then there's another piece that says, great, so we're building up risk, we're building up underwriting, we're building up all these services, we're figuring out how they go. We're getting process manager is now the new first step, the first engine of everything. Before I even make an offer, show it to me as a process manager. Break it down into steps, into stages. Show me how it goes. Show me if you've done it before. Reuse old stuff, bring in new stuff. This is what we're offering, right? So we're kind of there in terms of structure infrastructure. But then what we're saying too is, hey, the steps of this or any of these queries, because we've redone query, we've redone process manager, we've got at least the design on the Bayesian tools for our risk and underwriting stuff. And other models too, of course, but we're not waiting because we can basically say, I've already got some operational data. Let's just apply that to say, what am I really offering? What are the chances this goes tits up, right? But then what we say is, we're using predicates here instead of hard operators. In other words, instead of hard coding what a validator should look like or what a query should look like or how we know things are or what code we're pulling in through import mapping or whatever, like we're using these predicates. And these predicates use an import mapping structure on top of some basic evaluation. But now I can call in all sorts of functionality while I'm pulling it through, including we can look at the service level for something. So if I want to say, look, you might want to measure how often this operation succeeds, right? Just what's its track record. But also, how long did it take? How much money was it? What was its durability? Were there ever any security issues? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What else are we measuring? So if we have some measures of operations and we create an operational track records over time, what that starts to look like is a, a structure that can query on a different outcome or different outcome priorities. So now what we can say is, for this offer to work or for this choice to make sense, we're saying our priorities on outcome look like A, B, and C. And normally we do C, B, and A, say we do it in a different order, or we prefer this over that, but this one to work, it's this over this. Like it's really time sensitive, say, or it's really quality sensitive, say. And to be able to query what is the likely outcome with uh, with our track data, with our, for whatever we're tracking, and to be able to restructure an offer or a process manager according to these other metrics that we might not have had very well and still be able to pull it through. And we're doing the whole thing with just plain old Ruby, or excuse me, plain old Python and with a little bit of maybe over dependence, it's strange dependence on Pydantic base models. And part of that is just because we're prototyping. And so I want quick tests and I want to be able to try something that wasn't strictly designed and see if it works and go back and forth, and like a Jupyter notebook. So it's coming together. Now I still have to bridge backwards and get it back into the rabbit. But I'm seeing differently, I'm defining it differently, I'm organizing it differently. It's coming out a different shaped solution than the one I thought I was going to build, and I could have only seen it by doing it, at least the way I think or the way I work. So it has been an incredibly difficult week, but here we go. Um, Going forward, there is quite a few services we're pushing. Still pushing on conversation, process manager, risk. Those seem to be service level entity, to really get that going. But I want to push in a protocol. A protocol is likely, it's probably a process manager or something like it. It's tree-like operations, steps to do things to enforce a protocol of any type. So it's probably only going to be a process manager, but so all protocols becoming process managers. This is again why base model, I'm overusing base model, but that just basically means things are a bit interchangeable. They make a little bit of sense. Let's dance. So we'll see, but it's been quite a week. So we'll push on those things. I've got to get into demonstration first. I think my black hole has always been infrastructure, and I just geek out on all the possibilities, which you're hearing me do tonight. It's fine, not great, but demonstration first is a thing I'd really like to speak to, and so if that's occurring, let's do that. If I'm still struggling next week to do that, then I'd like to know why. Is it too much stress, too much anxiety, too much pressure? What is it that is making it so hard to keep an eye on the prize? The prize is people using the system and understanding it and being able to win. Oh, one other quick win for the week. Um, Looking at last week or so, unless I've got years wrong, but I think OPM, or excuse me, um, MCP, I don't know where OPM came from. MCP is the standard that OpenAI is just acknowledged and taken on. That's coming out of a very big common company everybody should know the name of, and I can't remember. Um, let's just say that it's a good thing. But basically, what it is, it's protocols. It's we're using protocols for the interchange of AI tools, and the Rabbit um, translates fairly well. We prefer several things that nobody else seems to be care about as like we do. I think it actually be kind of trivial for them to take on what we did, but where we probably win is the way we build community and serve people and get all the way down. And that's why we take so much time to figure out what a process manager does, what an offer does, what a choice does, what the conversations are around these things, how we measure everything, how we're actually accounting for things, what the observers are doing to make sure this thing can run, and then driving this thing into operations service, process manager now, or flow. So it has a way to run, and we're really driving services into good services, full services that have, they never dead end, they're accessible to everybody, they're discoverable by anybody, they're comparable. We're prepared to do the thing we want to do before we do it. It's the loo down stuff. So I think that they basically is just old school cool of do a good job serving people we care about and build a network of people that rely on that and give them access and control to what's going on and build these types of vector-based filters of whether or not we would want to work with somebody based on the choices and the values that they demonstrate with their use of the rabbit. And then services get turned on and off based on whether or not we trust them or we trust one another. And the same thing with pricing. If people are, or costs, if people are taking advantage of each other or hurting one another or doing something they shouldn't be doing, that should be very, very discoverable. And so, creating an environment where this could work, um, I think those are our true advantages, which are old school cool, and anybody should be able to do that. Most companies, I don't think, or organizations are aligned to that. So a little bit hard, a little bit of a coup internal, and easy to disrupt later if the company really isn't going in that direction. Their investors or whatever the reasons they do things are off kilter, but the interchange of their systems that people are already using and our systems that are only available to people that we trust and that pay whole costs. They pay their bills and we trust them. There are reasons for that, and their choices, how they do things, how they conduct themselves. So we do it based on results. So that's what Tiny Earth really is about, is how do we serve one another based on results, based in an environment that isn't predatory. Our highest nature can be better than what people have been doing, we think, and still be incredibly efficient. But we don't cut off our nose to spite our face. We aren't short-sighted with what our actual values are, what really actually matters here. So we pay our bills. My example for that was I was talking with Carolyn this week, poet, editor, brilliant, gentle, tender, and I was overwhelmed and didn't realize how overwhelmed I was. And I realized I was treating her like a therapist, and that's not her job. What we do is we read poetry together and we look at processes and flows. What we want is the writer center to be built up from the rabbit tools. But I was quite down and depressed by all the nonsense going on, and so I would try to just read the poetry and stay on topic. And she was kind of probing how I'm doing, and I went into a big spiel. It was dark, so I paid her an extra, basically what I pay my therapist, on top of. So I just sent her a PayPal. Just here we go. So we're collaborators on a project. We want to create a safe environment where writers can collaborate and have tools and still maintain their values and their collective intelligence and to work with each other and separately in ways that work. Um, so, I mean, just imagine if the calendar tool, so we only meet when we have capacity, and then we look at real capacity so that we protect ourselves. That's useful. And then the coder really is just building up anything they ask for. And then the long conversation can really be about, look, I'm worried about this. We go into there, we follow through. So maybe the writers are less protected by this type of thing. But the more I read Joan Didion, the more I push myself, Kurt Vonnegut, um, anybody that I've been reading. I love Kurt, by the way. His compassion, the value of what he offers for today's struggle is immeasurably perfect. So I'm not knocking him at all. In fact, I am 2% of what he has achieved with his lifetime of courage and willingness to look into the difficult parts of life. Um, and then Adrian Rich. I think people pronounce it a dream. Anyway, sorry. Every time I read her stuff, it just blows me away how good. And there is a long list of good writers who are sitting on my shelf because I'm struggling a little bit with just the pressures, the stresses, the depression, the struggle. It's hard to get deep into something hard. It's probably why these kinds of videos are garbage. Because how can you possibly follow up on the things if you're under stress too, which you probably are? That's why demo driven matters. Anyway, that's my report for the week.